Hello everyone, this is TailsFell109, and this is Gradius Galaxies for the Gameboy Advance, one of the first games that Konami released on the system, and a rather fun Gradius game to play. Now this is post-commentated, because commentating during a Gradius game just pretty much puts you through death. To begin the game, there are 4 types to pick from: the balance type, the wide area type, the power type, and the air-to-ground type. What you pick should really be based on preference, just like shield or force field. Force field takes less hits but protects your entire ship, and then of course you select your power-up system. At the start of the game, it is pretty much necessary that you pick up 2 speed-ups pretty much immediately, because 1 speed-up barely speeds up your ship. Therefore, it is rather important that you get the second speed-up so you can actually move. Though in this first stage, it might feel a little too quick, as it can be kind of easy to run into stuff this early in the game. Afterwards, it's best to actually go for some options before you pick up the lasers, because with only 1 laser power active, they go kinda slow. After getting your first option, it would be useful to get some missiles so that you can take care of enemies along the ground while you take care of everything else. If you're going through this small little area over here, you can get 5,000 points. Unfortunately, this is the only one that I know of in the game, though there are definitely more. The bouncing enemy down there shoots bullets in 3 directions. If you take the bomb path, it's best to take him down as soon as possible. With these little rocks here, you are going to time it. The first one is relatively easy. The second one can be a little tougher, but it's made easy if you equip that second speed up. These guys will shoot bullets in 4 directions, however they can be defeated very easily and are of very little threat. By this point, it would be useful to actually equip the laser, as we are getting pretty close to the boss. To get through this, it's useful to keep on shooting until you can see a path through, and then pretty much head to the right, making slight adjustments to your position if necessary. The second one coming up is indeed a little tougher to get through. Start by heading in as far right as you possibly can, and then inching your way to the left as the rock moves. Once it starts moving back up, keep on shooting until you can find a position where the shots come out clearly and go through. In this stage, on Loop 3, it actually plays Challenger 1985 for the stage theme, which is a nice nostalgic throwback to the first game. Here comes the first boss, Terracore. He'll move up and down towards you and shoot some side lasers. With 2 speed-ups, it can be kind of risky to actually go into them. After shooting about 5 volleys of shots or so, he'll send out some rocks. When his core is fully exposed, he'll lose his rock attack, but will now shoot 2 twin lasers, which of course, if you're not staying in them, is not that hard. The object for most of the bosses in this game is to obviously destroy the core, as anyone would know. Especially when the narrator keeps telling you about it, because it knows you'll never remember to do that. It's a very easy boss. In this next intro stage, it's a good idea to get your last option and then start to power up your lasers and missiles to full power to make the rest of the game quite a bit easier.
Missile.
The theme of this stage is a type of crystal-like stage, but it's a little different from how it works in other games, in which there are these generator-type things which raise the crystals up into the air. Destroying the generators first can destroy the crystals, but with enough shots you will most likely destroy the crystals first. The bigger ones cannot be destroyed and are used as a means to get in your way. Try to get enough power capsules to get your shield, whichever type you use, but be sure not to activate it right away. The smaller crystals can be used as support platforms for these larger crystals. You'll have to destroy them in order to create necessary paths to get through the stage. You'll see here that I refrain from actually equipping my force field until after getting through this section of the stage. The reason for that is there can be some tight spots that will immediately destroy your force field, even if your ship is certainly not going to be destroyed. This upcoming part, it can actually be one of the cheapest parts in the entire game. For going up here, you could easily trap yourself. Therefore I try to line up my options so that I can take down those smaller crystals at the bottom, so that I can actually avoid being crushed. When you get out of there, you can now equip your force field or shield. The rest of the stage is quite a bit easier. If you line up your options correctly, you can get through this part of the stage without even having to move, as long as you keep shooting. The crystals can give you a nice set of points. The only problem is, this game does not give you extra lives for your points. There doesn't seem to be any way to get 1-ups at all, unless there's like some real secret spots like in the NES Gradius where you can find 1-ups. The blue power-up capsule can actually destroy all bullets on the screen along with all the enemies. Of course, it wouldn't work on a boss if it ever did appear. This is a nice spot to get some points, but it's really only recommended that you take down one side if you really want to survive, unless you set up your options like this. But with everything cleared out of the way, it's time to get ready for the next boss. The boss coming up here, Crystal Gust, is really easy. It plays as some type of a gun wall, except it's only got one attack involving crystals, and they move in a fixed pattern. If you stay right here, they'll never be able to reach you. With full power-ups, you can also probably destroy the generators and crystals. It really is a very easy boss, and as long as you stay right here, you'll never get hit. By this point, the stage intros will start to get much tougher, as the enemies will actually start trying to fight back at you now. Just keep a cool head and try and destroy everything as soon as you can. The small rotating enemies that appear throughout this part can spin bullets around in multiple directions. It's once again a good idea to get rid of them as soon as possible. With full power-ups, including 2 speed-ups, you should be able to take them down relatively quickly, so it shouldn't be that much tougher. This fire-type stage can be a pretty tough one, and this first half of the stage is easily one of the worst places to die in the entire game. Throughout this part of the stage, a whole bunch of fire lines will start popping out of the intergalactic sun scattered throughout, ready to give your ship a nice unwanted tan. The fire lines tend to love ganging up on you, so it's a good idea to try and position your options so that they can end up inside the beasts to take them down as quickly as possible. Just remember to stay calm and not panic, as panic is the one thing these games try and make you do, which is always certain to screw you up at any given point. Dying in this spot, it can be almost impossible to survive the onslaught of fire lions, so if you die, you'll want to use the continue feature most likely to backtrack somewhere else in the game so that you can try and get some more power-ups to prepare for this part. Just remember to stay calm, and you can even survive areas like that. The second half of the stage abandons the fire lines and instead begins to use these set of fireballs, which when destroyed split off into 3 shots. In later loops, they actually split into 5-way shots. It really is a better idea to try and avoid shooting as much as you possibly can, only shooting when an enemy is coming in your way, as it's much easier to dodge these fireballs when they're as a whole, even though they do move slightly faster. The best thing to do is to try and make lots of movement so you can make some big gaps to avoid the fireballs. Of course, once things start to clear up, you can move and attack as you please. But in situations like these, if you're going to start shooting a lot of fireballs, be sure you have plenty of room to move up or down, as since the fireballs move slower, they eventually will fade away upon leaving the screen. Once the fireballs stop appearing though, it is time to prepare for the next boss. Prepare by moving up as much as you can. Eventually you will enter the boss arena, and the screen will end at some point. Also, all the way up here are some power capsules in case you need them. But the boss coming up, Volion, is once again another easy boss. Start by position yourself around here, and as soon as Volion appears, start moving down to shoot him. The fireballs will never hit you this way. Even if you don't have power-ups, you want to move this way, and then prepare to move up if he gets to the bottom. If he manages to get back to the top, he can also shoot some 3-way shots while moving around in a zigzag pattern. Stay to the left if you get that far into the fight. Now it's time for stage 4, which is the obligatory shmup difficulty curve level, as most of these games seem to get a lot harder by this point in the game, no matter how many levels there may be in the game. Whether the game's only got 5 or maybe even 10 stages, level 4 always seems to be where the difficulty really increases really quickly. At the start of the stage, you'll see a volcano. Prepare to start shooting all the rocks that appear. You may now also notice that you really want to take down the enemy generators very quickly, as bullets will appear a lot more frequently. As the volcano falls, stick to the bottom right corner, as it's the only way to avoid getting destroyed by it. In later loops, it falls down a lot faster, so you actually want to stick to the top left corner. With very few power-ups, this stage can be a real hassle, as there are many bullets in the stage, far more than quite a few other stages in the game. In this part of the stage, it is definitely recommended you try and destroy everything as quickly as possible, as the bullets will really gang up on you here. Just remember that the enemy generators can only fire out enemies once. After that point, they are pretty much useless, so you don't have to worry so much about destroying them if they've already unleashed this whole entire group of enemies. If you find a blue power capsule somewhere in that mess, it would be wise to pick up them while there's slots on the screen. Once again, you will see some volcanoes, but thankfully these ones are too lazy to get up and try and ram into you, so all you have to do is get rid of all of these rocks that they summon, while of course dealing with the enemy generators that have come up. Once again, try and make nice even spaces, which you can do by moving around when you need to. This next part of the stage is not so bullet intensive, so it's kind of a breather, but these waterfalls will constantly try to push you down. And as any Gradius player knows, hitting any ground is instant death. So stick to the bottom paths while you try and get rid of these cherry guys that love to split their cherry pairs whenever you shoot them. Here you want to get rid of the enemy generators as soon as you can. With this next rock, try and position your options so that they'll go through, so that they can get rid of the enemy generator on the right, so that they don't create any enemies to be a huge problem. Collect the power capsules if you need to. Otherwise, start to try and fill up as much of the screen as you can to try and avoid the enemy onslaughts. a whole bunch of enemies will start appearing from behind. If you can, try and move back and kill them quick. Sometimes, when my force field is almost dead, I like to intentionally run into a bullet when there's not much going on in the stage so that I can just form a new one, a fully powered up force field, and then proceed to collect more power capsules, as I find it's more useful in the long run to have the extra hit points. To get past those waterfalls, you just gotta move right with it. Here, you can kinda just let the waterfalls carry you down. The rest of the down movement unfortunately will have to be up to you. I know it can be very hard to nudge your way down, especially with 2 speed ups, but as long as you just nudge your way down carefully, you'll be able to fight the next boss of the game, which is a pretty unique one as a matter of fact. Bulbaros is a pretty unique boss in that it actually has 2 ships. They will eventually split, and then they will shoot out some lasers. Try destroying the big one if you want by going behind it. Afterwards, move away as the small one will start moving back and shoot in these strange ziggy-like patterns. Once he stops moving, move over here so that you can shoot him while avoiding all of the other bullets. Now, if you defeat the small ship first, the battle reacts a little differently. Of course, it can be a little hard, but if you stay in this area, you won't be able to get hit in this first part of the fight. So although it may be a little tedious, especially without power-ups, this will guarantee you safety in this first part of the fight. As you can see, the fixed movement of the core ships allow you to safely stay in between the lasers, which is usually a pretty common trick to do within Gradius shmups whenever you don't have a force field. When only the big guy is left, he works a little differently. At first, he would just move around like that, but then he'll start shooting a giant laser, which you get plenty of time to avoid, and thankfully, he doesn't seem to move much after this. Just remember, you never know how long the laser will take. Actually, it takes the same amount of time, but you always want to prepare just in case. You get plenty of time to avoid the laser and deal damage to the core ship. Either way you fight it, it's not a very hard boss. Now definitely pick up enough power capsules to form a force field, or if you want to do as I like to do, once I can get a force field, I abandon the old one so that I have more health. Especially because coming up is usually one of my most hated stages in any Gradius game, the Moai stage. Anyone can probably imagine why the Moai stages can be rather annoying in any Gradius game. Like most Gradius games that feature Moai heads, there are different variations as you appear, but the first set are always the ordinary ones that will just face in one direction and shoot energy rings at you, which can thankfully be destroyed. The Moai heads, however, seem to take a lot of hits this time around, and they don't seem to like to go down easily. What makes these Moai stages so hard is when you enter a group that has a ton of Moai heads and they're shooting all around you, so much that sometimes not even your lasers can seem to keep up with them. So it's very important to take note of where everything is, and of course, try and shoot as much as you can to slow down the game. In a Gradius game, slowdowns tend to be very inviting, as it gives you plenty of time to make your next move to avoid all the projectiles appearing on the screen. And thankfully, these Moai heads, it seems like they are just way too big and fat, because for some reason, the whole game has to slow down when it's trying to carry them out of the screen. In situations like this, it's important to position the options so that you can take care of energy rings that are coming from any direction, but as you can see, you sometimes have to move as the lasers do not always actually reach the energy rings, and one might actually hit your ship. Once you get to this wide open spot here, some energy rings will appear in all 8 directions, similar to the Zugs. Why the energy rings? Well, because this is the Moai stage. We want to look cool, don't we? Here, you start dealing with red Moai heads, which can turn to face your direction at any given time, and they actually come back to life. Because of that, it is not a smart idea to stay near the dead body of a red Moai, for if they regenerate while you're around that area, you will die, and that will be a very annoying way to die. So always keep your space from these guys, only moving down towards them to try and get some extra points. Even though you don't get lives, it's always satisfying to get a high score. Thankfully, for some reason, some are just too lazy to get this mad at you, as they just keep lying down with their pale black color. Coming up next is something that we've probably seen a few times in the Gradius game, big Moais, but for some reason, they dream of miniature bubbles, either that, or they just ate a few small ones for breakfast, and just let them out in a snot bubble, which is pretty gross. It's usually quite dangerous to actually release the miniature Moai heads, as they start following you around and they really are a hassle. Normally I try to shoot their mouths without getting rid of the bubble, but obviously I wasn't thinking so well this time. There aren't that many big Moais though, and once you do get past them, you gotta get ready for the next boss. Here are some power capsules from Zubs to tease you in case you really want to get that next shield, but you're like all the way on the other side. 5, just so that if you don't have anything on your bar, you won't be able to get your next force field. Dokotez, unlike the other bosses, can actually be pretty hard, so you actually want to get rid of these guys very quickly. They have 3 attacks that they do in the same pattern every time. They start by rotating around and shooting a whole bunch of energy rings. You usually won't be able to damage them that much. This next attack, where they shoot a whole bunch of blue destructible projectiles, is the best time to damage them. Get rid of either the top or the bottom ones, at least one of them as soon as you can, to make this next attack a lot easier. The Moai head all the way to right will just move up and down, while the other 2 will start walking, and you'll have to try and get through them, which is really difficult to do actually. So it's good to get rid of one of them as soon as you can. Stay far away from the left of the screen afterwards, as the Moai heads will come back and try to ram into you. Next, I'm going to try and get rid of the bottom one, just to make the third attack that much easier. Now, if this fight does take too long, the third head eventually does get an attack during this third attack, in which he will start shooting lasers. I forgot if it's from his horn or his eyes, because I managed to beat him quick enough before he was able to do that. If you don't kill the Moais quickly, this will easily become an incredibly difficult boss, and without power-ups, chances are you're just going to have to stay at the top of the screen when he does the blue projectile attack to avoid death, because it really is way too much to avoid without any power-ups. This boss might take a bit of time. Afterwards, you gotta get ready for what is probably one of the toughest stages in the game for me to survive purely, the cell stage. Aside from having a lot of bullets in the opening section, this stage has a lot of hazards that I'm pretty sure have killed many players quite a few times. Even professionals will probably have a little bit of trouble getting through the obstacles that this stage presents. Unfortunately, the stage intro is pretty short, so you won't be able to get that many power capsules if you're in desperate need of power-ups. Throughout the beginning of the stage, you'll see these strange tentacle things. The purple ones are indestructible, the red ones can be destroyed, so it's important to keep shooting as much as you can. These weird things will shoot out 5 bullets in 5 directions while they are being destroyed, only after they're destroyed. So if you don't want to deal with the bullets, you can just simply leave them alone. The enemy generators are a real problem now, as the enemies will start shooting instantly, almost pretty much like suicide bullets. Now, I hate these things. Every time you shoot them, they start wobbling around, but you have to shoot them to create spaces to get through. As you can see, I unfortunately had to pick up some power capsules just to survive. How much they move is based on how you shoot them. If you shoot at the top of them, they seem to bounce around a lot more. If you shoot inside them, they don't seem to move around as much. So it's kind of a strategy as to how you get rid of them. Those things have been the death of me many times, and I was very worried, almost certain that I was definitely going to be losing a life in this stage. Since this game doesn't give extra lives, that can be a real frustration. Thankfully, there are some simple spots with them. Get a force field if you must, but it probably won't last too long as we go through everyone's favorite hazard in the world, the regeneratable walls. Which, if your options are in the wrong place, usually always find a way to kill you while you're in the middle of it. With these regeneratable walls, I find it best to usually stay at the far right, since the walls never seem to regenerate that far in, probably because they were just destroyed, so they don't have enough time to rematerialize quick enough to kill you. As you can see, sometimes I just stay at the far left and try and take care of the enemies that are all the way inside the big holes. But of course, that means your timing needs to be very precise with the regeneratable wall, or else you will surely perish. Now don't cheer just yet, because we still have to deal with more of these things. Which makes dealing with the enemies at the top of the screen a real hassle, forcing you to dodge a few bullets along the way. Try and collect enough power capsules to prepare for the next boss coming up, because you don't get a lot of space to avoid its attacks. The game doesn't give you that many power capsules right before bosses in this game, as you may have noticed, which is a real pain. The Brachian Eye is one of those interesting organic type bosses. I'm not exactly sure what that eye is exactly made of, but it creates these arms with other eyes and some turrets that will shoot bullets. The Brachian Eye, once it forms its 5 legs, will move around in a circle. Keep on shooting, try and destroy one of the arms if you can, because this will cause the boss to go towards you. As long as you stay at the far left, it'll never hit you, and this will allow you to get a lot of damage so that you can kill this boss very quickly. The next stage likes to throw a lot at you, but it doesn't exactly seem to know what it actually wants to be, because it keeps constantly changing what it's trying to do to you. It's more of an open space type level, but it has this pretty blue background with it. Once again, try and collect as many power-ups as you can before the stage starts. Throughout the stage, you will see these enemies, and when you destroy them, shoot these blue bullet things in 4 diagonal directions. The first part of this stage likes to throw a lot of crystals at you, kind of like the crystal stage in Gradius 2, only this time it's a lot harder, as the game throws a lot more at you, and the crystals cannot be destroyed even with a blue power capsule. So you're spending most of your time just trying to find these small areas that you can cut through all the crystals while taking care of all the enemies that appear, as even though the blue bullets might be a bit annoying, they do shoot regular bullets and they do follow you around. Thankfully that blue power capsule appeared so I could get rid of all of the blue enemies rather easily. Once the storm clears up, you start seeing a lot of random enemy generators that won't even open. They were probably just trying to get to other regions in space, and you just so happen to be in way of the cargo load. So the bacteria must be really mad at you for this part, as you destroy all of their cargo. Oh, too bad. If only they put them in suitcases, maybe we wouldn't have minded so much. But unfortunately, this isn't Parodius, so the Bacterians really aren't that smart. Now are they? You can destroy these for some nice points, which do nothing but give you a higher score. Once again, try and stay to the far right if enemies start appearing, so you have plenty of room to avoid. After destroying the enemy generators, the Bacterians get really mad and start swarming after you like a whole group of bees. Or more like wasps. Destroy these enemies as quickly as you can, otherwise you will deal with a huge bullet onslaught that can be really hard to avoid, especially as they trap you closer and closer to the top of the screen. Like I said, this stage doesn't really seem to know what it really wants to be. It just likes to throw a lot of stuff at you. The next boss, Perla Meralda, is honestly a little easier than some of the previous bosses you've been meeting up with, but it's still not one of the easier bosses. It has a lot of defense that you're going to have to get rid of. At first, the boss plays much like a big core, just with a lot of extra defense. However, after shooting 4 lasers, it starts doing a different attack. The first one it usually does is, it summons these lasers and starts shooting a whole bunch of missiles around. If you stay at the far right where the barriers once were, you can hide in there while the missiles are coming out, making the fight a lot easier. If he manages to get to this a second time, he'll just do a rapid fire of the 4 lasers. Next up, we are at the final stage, which is easily the longest and hardest stage in the entire game, as this intro will let you know, as it's harder and longer than any of the others you've seen this far. Get rid of these enemies as quickly as you can. Thankfully, you do get a lot of power-ups, but it won't matter if you don't have at least 1 speed up before coming into this. Because, once again, this stage throws a lot at you. The stage starts out with a really fun high-speed chase. Although since this isn't Sonic, you really don't want to touch anything at all. The high-speed section is home to these red dots that you need to destroy like any other high-speed stage, but it also has these strange-looking wall things, which you'll sometimes need to shoot farther back. But sometimes their movement's a little finicky. Going through these can be a real hassle, and it involves real precise timing. Even so, you'll still probably lose your force field. Really, I would refrain from equipping it until you get to the end of the high speed section, as there are still plenty of obstacles that will quickly get rid of your force fields. Stay to the far left, and do not fear the bullets. Keep a calm mind and you'll be able to avoid them all. At the bottom here, get ready for the boss. The first boss of this stage, Rexian Core, has 3 phases. The first one shoots some lasers at the top and bottom, while it shoots some lasers that will try and home down on you. But with full power-ups, all these forms tend to go down really quickly. To avoid the homing lasers, just move away, usually to the left whenever they appear. This first boss actually has 3 parts. Whenever you destroy one of the parts, this wall will appear and it will regenerate back to max health. The second one uses these strange rods that will shoot lasers in various directions, but again, with full power-ups, it doesn't really get to do anything. Because I'm at full power, the first part of the fight actually was pretty much the hardest part, because it's the only part that was really going to be able to get any possible hits in at me. The third form is easily the hardest if you don't have power-ups. Thankfully, each form counts as a checkpoint. It can shoot fire, which blasts into a whole bunch of directions if you fail to avoid it and you decide to destroy it. It also shoots zubs and then starts shooting trash in a whole bunch of directions, which I think can be destroyed. But because I'm fully powered up, you don't get to see that. Now, the final stage plays more like your average base type stage, with a lot of really hard enemies and generators. Those blue things will try and zoom up to you if you get into their line of range, so you'll try and destroy them before you get close to them. I hope you've enjoyed checkpoints, because this area here is the last checkpoint you'll pretty much see until you reach the next boss. Once again, these generators aren't a real problem. After one set of enemies, you're perfectly safe. Head all the way to the right once you get here, as this is where all of the walls will start to move in an attempt to crush you. Your movement may be limited, but still stay to the far right to avoid death, with one of the cheaper tricks in the Gradius series, though it seems to love using this quite often. Be careful about the zubs as you try and reach your way to the bottom. As you can see, you have to be at the far right to survive that. The enemies you start meeting with can be a real hassle as you start to get real closed in. So try and position your options so they can get of enemies that will start appearing from your left. And then move up here as the walls just want to move up. Once again, you have a lot of tight spaces, so try and position your options so you can get rid of them without dealing with the enemy fire. Here you'll see how these blue enemies work. If you zoom away from them, you can deal with them before they ram into you. At least get away from them. Now these blue generators are actually a problem this time because they actually unleash enemies a second time. So you're really going to have to position your ship with the options in precise movement so you can destroy the enemies before they shoot too many bullets. Either way, you don't have a lot of room to avoid. This next part actually throws a little trick from Konami's 1981 Scramble, which is kind of the spiritual predecessor to the Gradius games. You cannot destroy these just like in Scramble, and just like in Scramble, it is very important to stick to the bottom of the screen to avoid fire. Once you get past that, you'll get a few more power capsules before fighting the next boss. Be careful about using your force field here as you can easily lose it. Cliff Core is your more standard gun wall with many tricks up its sleeves. It's got 4 turrets to shoot at you which cannot be destroyed, and it summons a whole bunch of lasers. It also has 2 enemy generators to send out ductors. Now what I like to do is, I like to position myself around here so I can take care of the duckers that come down here as long as I'm shooting, and the duckers at the top will not be able to reach me. Along with this, because the turrets cannot find me, they will not shoot at me, making this to be an ideal safe spot. However, you gotta be very careful in later loops when the duckers actually shoot suicide bullets, in which you might have to get a little closer to the bottom generator so that they don't shoot suicide bullets at you, in which case you will most certainly die. Now, like with pretty much any Gradius boss, they time out after a while. However, this can be a little boring to watch, so if you don't want to worry about death, this is definitely the easiest way to get through the boss, and usually gun walls are worth finding safe spots because they're just usually a pain no matter what. So as long as you stand here, you should be alright. After deciding that this game of cat and mouse has just gotten too boring, the Cliff Core will commit suicide. But we're not done yet. We're up to the last stretch, which of course has everyone's favorite regeneratable walls and closing pillars. So once again, it's all about timing. You shoot through, and then you gotta determine whenever you want to pass by the regeneratable walls to try and avoid being crushed by these. This part can be a little harder to time, so I kind of just go through. Once again, staying to the far right for regeneratable walls is a trick that works very well. Once you get here, you'll deal with a few more enemies in which you can get some more power capsules, but honestly by this point, they really aren't helpful at all. Because there aren't that many enemies left, and the next boss, well, the force field and any power-ups in general is incredibly useless. Even the speed-ups aren't that useful here. The speed-ups actually make this next boss a lot harder. The rotating wall is basically the shadow dancer of Gradius Galaxies. He will slowly move around the screen while you gotta try and get in between his legs in order to survive. This is where you start to notice that the hitbox is a little weird. It seems to only be at the top right corner of the ship, especially during this fight. Once he starts moving to the left, the screen will start scrolling. You want to try and get past him as quickly as possible. That's probably the only leg in which you can actually get through in time as he starts to grow. If you're within the legs by this point, you've already died. Don't panic and just let him come to you during this part. Stay here until you know that you won't be able to survive any longer staying there and start moving down with the leg. He will shrink again by this point. Just stay to the far right as he won't be able to reach you by this point. He will shrink and then fall to the ceiling, so just stay right here until he falls up to the ceiling. Once he does, start moving away as the final boss comes in. Move in to the right as quickly as you can as the barrier comes down for the final boss, Brain, which as we all know with Gradius games is easily the hardest boss in the game as you try to shoot its eyes while not running into it. Once it's down, you can enjoy the ending to Gradius Galaxies. Gradius Galaxies is a fun little shmup for the Gameboy Advance and probably the best one on the system. Get it if you can. Here I'd decide to show off what the Konami code does. It gives you powers for a couple seconds and then it kills you. Unfortunately, I didn't know that this would nullify my high score. What a pity. This has been Tales for 109. Have a nice day.